My name is Ethan, and I'm 25 years old. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. Life here isn't exactly thrilling. The neighborhood is a collection of identical houses with neatly trimmed lawns, and the people are friendly enough, offering polite waves, but they don't often stop to chat. It's the kind of place where you hear the distant hum of lawnmowers in the morning or the faint bark of a dog from a couple of streets down. It's peaceful, and that's about it. I live with my dad, Thomas, and my stepmother, Claire. My dad, 58, is a hard-working contractor who spends most of his time running his local construction business. He's always on the move, constantly working, always buried in his laptop when he's home, answering emails or reviewing plans. He's the kind of guy who's never home before dinner, and even when he is, he's rarely really present. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Claire entered our lives about 5 years ago after my mom passed away from cancer when I was 16. For a long time, it was just Dad and me, and though we got by, the house always felt empty. Dad never really talked much about dating, and so when he introduced Claire, it was a surprise to both of us. They'd met through mutual friends, and within what felt like no time at all, they were married. Claire, who's 47, has this effortless grace about her. She has this quiet beauty, the kind that turns heads without even trying. Her rich chestnut hair falls in soft waves past her shoulders, and her eyes, those eyes, are an intense, almost hypnotic shade of green that could make you lose track of what you were saying if she looked at you for too long. She's always been kind to me, treating me more like a friend than a stepson, but there's always been this tension between us. I don't know when it started, but I know it's only grown stronger over the years. Maybe it's the way she carries herself, confident yet approachable. Or maybe it's the way her laugh fills the room, or the way her smile deepens when she catches me staring for a moment too long. Whatever it is, it's something I can't ignore. We live in a modest 2-story house, the kind with a white picket fence, a small front garden that Claire tends to. Every morning she's out there taking care of the roses or pulling weeds, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, wearing fitted jeans that make it hard not to look. I work part-time at a local tech store, fixing phones and laptops, and I'm also taking night classes to finish my degree in software engineering. Most days, when I'm not at work or school, I spend time in my room playing video games or scrolling through my phone. It's not a glamorous life, but it's comfortable. At least it was. One Thursday night, everything changed. Dad was away on a business trip, something that had become more frequent over the past year. Claire and I had settled into a comfortable routine when he was gone. She'd make dinner, we'd eat together, and then we'd both retreat to our respective spaces for the night. That evening, I was lying on my bed, scrolling through my phone in the warm glow of my nightstand lamp. A playlist of mellow acoustic psalms played softly in the background. I was full of desire, lost in thoughts, and passing time with videos when a soft knock on my door broke the silence. "Ethan?" Claire's voice was gentle, almost hesitant. I didn't lock the door, and before I even had a chance to react, she was already standing there with that effortless grace she always carried. She caught me in a vulnerable moment, and I froze. She stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. "What are you doing?" she asked, her eyes scanning the room. "Nothing," I said, trying to sound casual, but the sudden rush of heat on my face gave me away. She walked over, picking up my phone and glancing at the screen. I couldn't stop myself from watching her move, her presence dominating the room without even trying. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her movements deliberate, slow, the mattress dipped slightly under her weight, and suddenly the air felt thick with unspoken tension. "You've grown up so much," she said softly, her eyes locking with mine. There was something in her gaze, something warm yet searching that caused my heart to race. I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "Yeah, I guess," I stammered. Claire reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. Her touch was light, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "Do you ever think about what you want?" she asked, her voice quiet, barely a whisper. "What do you mean?" I asked, unsure of what she meant. "In life," she said, her eyes steady on mine. "What makes you happy? What do you want for yourself?" I paused. No one had ever asked me that, at least not in this way. "I don't know," I admitted after a moment, feeling caught off guard. "I guess I've never really thought about it." Claire smiled, her hand lingering on my cheek for just a moment before she pulled it away. "You should," she said softly. "You deserve to be happy, Ethan." There was a brief silence, one that stretched out endlessly between us until Claire leaned closer. The kiss was hesitant at first, her lips brushing against mine in a way that made my breath catch. For a moment, I didn't move, too stunned to react, but then something shifted in me. I reached up, cupping her cheek as I deepened the kiss. Her lips were soft, warm, and tasted faintly of the wine we'd had at dinner. My heart pounded as her hands moved to my shoulders, pulling me closer. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us in this small, intimate space. Her fingers trailed down my arms, sending sparks through my body. She pulled back slightly, resting her forehead against mine as we both caught our breath. "This is wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maybe," I said, still holding her gaze, "but it doesn't feel wrong." Her eyes searched mine, filled with confusion and hesitation, and for a moment, it felt like she might pull away, but then she leaned in again, her lips capturing mine with more urgency this time. My hands moved instinctively to her waist, pulling her closer. Her body pressed against mine, and I could feel the warmth of her skin. Her hands slid up my chest as though memorizing every inch of me. I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. She pulled away just enough to look at me, her green eyes filled with conflicting emotions, desire, hesitation, and something deeper that I couldn't name. Her breath was warm against my skin, and for a moment, we just stayed like that, close enough to feel each other's heartbeat. "This is dangerous, Ethan," she whispered softly, her voice barely audible. "Your dad." I shook my head, cutting her off. "He's never here, Claire. It's just us most of the time." Her lips parted as if to say something, but she hesitated. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between what was right and what she felt deep inside. "This isn't just about him," she said finally. "It's about us, about what this means." I reached for her hand, intertwining my fingers with hers. "It doesn't have to mean anything, Claire. It's just us right here, right now." Her gaze softened, and she let out a shaky breath. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," I said, my thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable, and then she leaned in again, her lips finding mine with renewed determination. This kiss was deeper, more intense, like she'd let go of whatever had been holding her back. Her hands moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I could feel her body pressing against mine. The weekend felt like a bubble, separate from the real world, where nothing mattered but us. During the day, we pretended everything was normal, but the evenings were ours, filled with whispered conversations and soft touches. We sat on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder as we watched old movies. Her fingers traced patterns on my arm, or we'd take walks through the garden at dusk, the scent of roses filling the air as her hand brushed against mine. Every simple touch sent sparks through me. Each moment felt like a secret, something precious and fragile, and I knew it couldn't last. But for those 2 days, we let ourselves forget the consequences. When Sunday came, everything shifted back to reality. The house was quiet again. Thomas would be coming home soon, and life would resume its usual rhythm. Claire and I both knew that what had happened couldn't continue. It was too risky, too complicated. But a part of me didn't want to let go of what we had shared. The silence between us that day felt heavier than ever. We were both avoiding the truth, pretending that nothing had changed. but I could sense it, an unspoken tension, a weight in the air. Every glance, every word felt charged, like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move, to say the things we both knew but weren't ready to acknowledge. I found myself wishing for just one more moment with her, one more minute before everything returned to the way it was before. But it wasn't going to happen. There was no going back. Later that night, I stood in a kitchen, staring blankly at the refrigerator, the soft hum of the appliance, the only sound in the quiet house. My mind was racing, thoughts tangled together. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the moments we'd shared, the warmth of her touch, the way everything felt so real, yet so wrong. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Claire standing in the doorway. Her eyes met mine, and I could see that she, too, was carrying the weight of what had happened. We didn't say anything at first. We didn't have to. The silence between us spoke volumes. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than usual. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," she said, her words heavy with emotion. "It's too much. We've crossed a line and I don't know how to fix it." I froze, feeling the impact of her words like a punch to the gut. I had known it was coming, but hearing her say it made it all so much more real. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't know how to let go of this, of us." Claire's face softened, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and sorrow. "Maybe we have to, Ethan. Maybe we both need to let go. This, what we've been doing, it can't go on. It's not right and it's only going to get harder." I wanted to protest, to argue that we could find a way, but the truth of her words sunk in deeper than anything I could say. "I don't want to lose you," I finally admitted, my voice cracking, "but I know you're right." Claire took a deep breath, her hand trembling slightly as she wiped a tear from her cheek. "Sometimes letting go is the only way to save what's left," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you either, but I think we both know we can't keep going like this. We have to stop." I nodded slowly, my heart heavy with understanding. She was right. We had crossed a line, and no matter how strong the pull was between us, it wasn't enough to erase the reality of the situation. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, looking at each other. Both of us lost in the weight of what we were saying goodbye to. Then Claire spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said, her words barely a whisper, and with that, she turned and walked away. I stood there, alone in the kitchen, feeling as if the ground beneath me had shifted. I wanted to call out to her, to stop her, but I knew it was too late. We couldn't undo what had already happened, we couldn't go back to the way things were before. The days that followed were quieter than usual. Thomas came home and Claire fell back into her routine, but the tension between us lingered in the background. We both tried to act like everything was fine, but it was impossible to ignore the change. I buried myself in work and school, trying to distract myself from the aching emptiness that seemed to fill every corner of my life. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the memory of Claire. The way she looked at me, the way she touched me, the way we had connected in a way that was impossible to explain. One evening, after a long day, I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. The air was cool and the silence of the neighborhood felt like a weight pressing on my chest. It was in those quiet moments that the truth hit me hardest, that I would never be able to forget Claire, no matter how much I tried. I heard the door open behind me, and I turned to see Claire standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, her expression unreadable. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us speaking, until finally, she broke the silence. "I think we've both learned something from all this," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "About ourselves, about each other, and maybe about what it means to let go." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. "Yeah, I think so too," I said quietly. Claire looked at me for a long moment, her eyes softening. "I'm sorry, Ethan, for everything that happened. I don't regret it, but it wasn't right. We can't keep pretending that nothing has changed. I don't regret it either, I admitted, my voice thick with emotion, but I know we have to let it go. Claire smiled faintly, and for a moment, I saw the warmth that had once been there. You'll be okay, Ethan, she said softly, we both will be. With that, she turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing there, alone once more. I stayed on the porch a little longer, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. I knew I would never be the same again, but in some ways, I also knew that I would never truly let go of Claire. The days moved forward, and life resumed its usual rhythm. The house was quieter, filled with the unspoken words we never said. I tried to move on, focusing on my work and my studies, but the memory of Claire lingered in my mind, haunting me. We both tried to move forward, but the connection we shared, no matter how wrong it had been, would never truly fade. It would always be a part of me, a chapter of my life that I couldn't erase, and as the days passed, I came to realize that sometimes, some things, no matter how complicated, no matter how wrong, stay with you forever.